A racist cop pulls a gun on an elderly black man right in the middle of a courtroom, shocking everyone who thought justice was safe behind those walls. This isn't a heated argument. It's a racist explosion that puts a man's life seconds from ending in front of a stunned judge and jury. But just as the gun is about to fire, someone unexpected steps through the doors. The old man's FBI son, and he's ready to stop the madness. How could a cop feel bold enough to draw his weapon in court? What dark secrets keep this town trapped in fear? And when the truth explodes, who will still be standing when the smoke clears? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The first rays of sunlight crept through Harold Tate's bedroom window, painting warm stripes across his worn quilt. He'd been awake for hours, lying still in the quiet darkness, his mind churning over the testimony he would give today. At 76, he didn't need an alarm clock anymore. His body knew when it was time. Harold's joints creaked as he pushed himself up from the bed. The hardwood floor felt cool beneath his feet, grounding him in the familiar routine of morning. He pulled on his robe, the soft flannel one his late wife Martha had given him years ago, and made his way to the bathroom. In the mirror, he studied his reflection. Deep brown eyes gazed back at him, surrounded by wrinkles earned through decades of standing up for what was right. His silver hair, neatly trimmed just yesterday, framed a face that had seen too much injustice, but had never lost its dignity. "Today's the day, Martha," he murmured, touching the wedding band he still wore. "Another fight for justice, just like the old days." The kitchen welcomed him with morning silence. Harold moved deliberately through his breakfast routine, measuring coffee grounds into the filter, filling the pot with water. The familiar scent of brewing coffee soon filled the air, a comfort he'd relied on through countless difficult mornings. While his oatmeal warmed on the stove, Harold walked to the living room wall where dozens of photographs hung in simple frames. His eyes found the one he was looking for: Malcolm's graduation from the FBI Academy. His son stood tall and proud in his dark suit, Harold and Martha beaming beside him. Martha's smile still lit up the room, even from a photograph. "You'd be proud of our boy, Martha," Harold said softly, touching the frame. "Standing up for what's right, just like we taught him." The morning paper waited on his doorstep, wrapped in plastic against the morning dew. Harold settled into his favorite armchair, the one with the perfect view of his small garden, and unfolded the newspaper. The headline jumped out at him immediately. "Officer Maddox Misconduct Trial Continues. Key Witness to Testify." Harold's hands tightened slightly on the paper as he read. The article outlined the basics. Officer Brent Maddox, accused of racial profiling and excessive force. Multiple incidents swept under the rug. A pattern of harassment that the community had whispered about for years but had been too afraid to challenge. Until now. Harold set the paper aside and stirred his oatmeal, adding a small drizzle of honey. Another habit Martha had started him on. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking time until he needed to leave. He ate slowly, methodically, knowing he'd need his strength today. After breakfast, Harold walked to his bedroom closet. The gray suit hung ready, pressed and waiting. It wasn't his newest suit, but it was his most trusted, the one he'd worn to countless courtrooms over his career. The fabric showed slight wear at the elbows, but the suit still fit well, its familiar weight settling on his shoulders like armor. He tied his dark blue tie with practiced movements, checking the knot in the mirror. Martha had always said this tie brought out his eyes. The gold tie pin, a gift from his first big civil rights victory, gleamed softly in the morning light. Harold packed his briefcase carefully. Reading glasses, a small notebook, his favorite pen. Each item had its place, just as each piece of evidence had its purpose. Preparation had always been his strength, both in the courtroom and in life. In the hall mirror, Harold made one final check of his appearance. The gray suit, pressed white shirt, and blue tie presented exactly what he wanted the court to see: a dignified professional who commanded respect. But more importantly, he saw in his reflection what Martha had always seen: a man who never backed down from fighting for what was right. A car horn sounded outside, 2 short beeps. Right on time. Harold picked up his briefcase and walked to the front door, pausing for just a moment with his hand on the knob. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and opened the door to face whatever the day might bring. Lewis Carter's old Buick idled at the curb, its dark blue paint gleaming in the morning sun. Harold recognized the familiar silhouette of his friend behind the wheel and made his way down the front steps, gripping the iron railing that Martha had insisted they install last year. "Morning, Mr. Tate," Lewis said, stepping out to open the back door. His weathered face creased with concern. "How you feeling today?" "Ready as I'll ever be, Lewis," Harold replied, easing into the back seat. The leather upholstery was cool against his back, and the car smelled of the pine air freshener Lewis always used. Lewis slid back behind the wheel, adjusting his mirror to keep an eye on Harold. "Been hearing things, Mr. Tate. Maddox's people been stirring up trouble since yesterday, talking about making sure you don't get to testify." Harold nodded slowly, watching the familiar streets of his hometown slide past the window. "They've been trying to silence the truth for years, Lewis. Today won't be any different." "Yes, sir, but—" Lewis's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "These folks mean business. Saw some of them at the diner this morning, talking loud about teaching certain people their place. The way they looked at me—" He shook his head. They turned onto Main Street, where the morning crowd was already gathering. Harold noticed how conversation stopped as the car passed. Faces turned to watch, some curious, others hostile. Outside Thompson's Hardware, a group of white men leaned against pickup trucks, their eyes following the Buick with unmistakable malice. "Town's changed," Lewis said quietly. "Or maybe it hasn't changed enough." "It's always been here, Lewis," Harold replied, watching a mother pull her children closer as they drove by. "Just hidden better some days than others." The courthouse came into view, its red brick facade rising above the surrounding buildings. Even from 2 blocks away, they could see the crowds gathering on the steps. People held signs, their messages visible even at this distance. "Support our police," on one side, "Justice for all," on the other. Lewis slowed the car, carefully navigating through the growing throng. Someone recognized the vehicle and shouted. The crowd parted, creating a narrow path to the courthouse steps. Voices rose on both sides. "You tell them, Mr. Tate." "Go home, old man." "We're with you, Harold." "Back off, race traitor." The shouts bounced off the car windows like hail. Lewis pulled up as close to the steps as he could manage, positioning the Buick to give Harold the shortest possible walk to the entrance. "Miss Gloria said she'd meet you in the lobby," Lewis said, turning in his seat. "You want me to walk with you?" Harold patted his friend's shoulder. "No need to put yourself at risk, Lewis. I've walked through worse crowds than this." "That's what worries me, sir. You shouldn't have to keep doing this." "Some fights are worth having more than once," Harold said, straightening his tie. He gripped his briefcase and reached for the door handle. Lewis's voice stopped him. "Mr. Tate, Martha would be proud of you today. Real proud." Harold smiled, feeling the familiar ache at the mention of his wife. "Thank you, Lewis. I'll see you after." The noise hit him like a wave as he stepped out of the car. The summer air was already thick with humidity, and the crowd pressed closer, their signs waving above their heads. Harold kept his eyes forward, climbing the courthouse steps with measured steps. "Justice for Harold Tate!" came a shout from his left, followed by supportive cheers. "Remember your place," someone countered from the right, angry and sharp. Harold continued climbing, neither slowing nor hurrying. Each step felt heavy with memory. How many times had he climbed these same stairs over his career? How many fights for justice had started right here? The courthouse doors stood open, flanked by stone columns and stern-faced deputies. They watched Harold approach without expression, their hands resting near their weapons. He nodded to them as he passed, noting how neither acknowledged him. The lobby's air conditioning washed over him as he entered, a blessed relief from the heat outside. The marble floor echoed with footsteps and whispered conversations. Several people stood in small groups, watching him with undisguised interest. "Harold!" A familiar voice cut through the murmur. Gloria Simmons strode toward him, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble. Her dark suit was immaculate, and her expression carried the focused energy he remembered from countless cases they'd worked together. Gloria. He smiled warmly as she reached him. "Right on time, as always." She took his arm, her grip firm and reassuring. "These fools think they can scare us with their little show outside? Please. I've seen scarier crowds at a church bake sale." Harold chuckled, grateful for her steady presence. "How's it looking in there?" "Packed house," Gloria replied, leading him toward the courtroom doors. "Maddox's supporters got here early, took up most of the gallery. But we've got the truth on our side, and that's all that matters." They paused before the heavy wooden doors. Inside, they could hear the low rumble of voices waiting for the proceedings to begin. Gloria squeezed his arm gently. "You ready for this, old friend?" Harold thought of Martha, of Malcolm, of all the people who'd stood where he was standing now, fighting for what was right. He thought of the faces outside, both angry and hopeful, and of the long road that had led him here. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm ready." Gloria nodded, and together they pushed open the courtroom doors. The courtroom fell silent as Harold and Gloria entered. Every head turned, every whisper died. The gallery benches creaked with shifting bodies as people craned their necks to watch them walk down the center aisle. Harold kept his eyes forward, but he could feel the weight of the stairs. To his right, the benches were packed with Maddox's supporters, faces he recognized from town, all wearing blue ribbons pinned to their shirts in solidarity with the police. To his left sat a smaller group of community members who'd come to support him, their expressions tight with worry. At the front of the courtroom, Officer Brent Maddox sat at the defense table in his pressed uniform, his attorney whispering in his ear. Maddox's jaw clenched visibly as Harold passed. His eyes, cold and hard, followed Harold's every move. Judge William Carson peered down from the bench, his lined face impassive beneath steel-gray hair. Harold had appeared before him many times over the years, never quite sure where the judge's sympathies truly lay. "All rise," the bailiff called out as court was called to session. Outside in the parking lot, Malcolm Tate sat in his unmarked FBI vehicle, a radio earpiece in place, and his phone displaying a steady stream of text updates from Gloria's assistant inside. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel as he listened to the proceedings begin. Back inside, Harold settled into the witness chair, adjusting his tie as he was sworn in. The prosecutor, Sarah Chen, approached with purposeful steps. "Mr. Tate," she began, "please tell the court about what you witnessed on the evening of May 15th. Harold leaned slightly toward the microphone. "I was leaving the community center after our weekly senior citizens meeting. It was about 8:30 p.m. I saw Officer Maddox had pulled over young Marcus Williams's car across the street." "And what drew your attention to this traffic stop?" "Officer Maddox's voice," Harold replied evenly. "He was shouting at Marcus to exit the vehicle with his hands up, even though Marcus already had his hands on the steering wheel, visible through the windshield." From the defense table, Maddox shifted in his chair, his face reddening. His attorney scribbled notes. Outside, Malcolm's phone buzzed with another update. He read it quickly. "Your father's testimony starting strong." Maddox, looking agitated. Harold continued, his voice steady and clear. "I decided to observe the situation. Given Officer Maddox's known history with our community's young people, Marcus was fully compliant, but Officer Maddox immediately forced him to the ground, pressing his knee into the boy's back." "What happened next, Mr. Tate?" "I began recording with my phone. Officer Maddox noticed me and demanded I stop. When I refused, stating my legal right to record police activity, he left Marcus handcuffed on the ground and approached me." The prosecutor nodded. "And how did Officer Maddox behave toward you?" "He attempted to grab my phone. When I stepped back, he said—" Harold paused, his eyes meeting Maddox's across the courtroom. "He said, 'You people never learn your place. Maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson.'" A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Carson banged his gavel once. Maddox's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the defense table. His attorney placed a warning hand on his arm. "Did Officer Maddox make any other statements to you?" Chen asked. "Yes," Harold replied. "He told me that my civil rights lawyer days were over, and that things were different now. He said he could make people disappear if they caused too much trouble." Another update lit up Malcolm's phone screen. "Maddox losing composure. Dad holding steady." The prosecutor introduced Harold's phone video as evidence. The footage played on the courtroom screens, showing Maddox's aggressive approach, his threatening posture, his hand repeatedly moving to his weapon while he berated Harold. "Mr. Tate," Chen continued, "in your experience as a civil rights attorney, how would you characterize Officer Maddox's behavior that night?" "Objection!" Maddox's attorney shot to his feet. "Calls for speculation." "Your Honor," Chen countered, "Mr. Tate's extensive legal experience qualifies him to make such an assessment." "Overruled," Judge Carson said. "The witness may answer." Harold spoke carefully, each word measured and clear. "Officer Maddox's actions that night followed a pattern I've observed throughout my career. He escalated a routine situation into a confrontation, used excessive force against a compliant citizen, and attempted to intimidate a legal observer. His behavior showed complete disregard for civil rights and proper police procedure." Maddox's chair scraped against the floor as he leaned forward, his face now dark with rage. His attorney gripped his shoulder, whispering urgently in his ear. Outside, Malcolm listened intently to the radio feed, his hand resting instinctively near his weapon. Another text from Gloria's assistant. "Maddox looking dangerous. Should we be worried?" Malcolm typed back quickly. "I'm right outside. Keep me posted on every reaction." The prosecutor continued her questioning, and Harold's testimony remained unwavering. He described other incidents he'd witnessed involving Maddox, each account delivered with the same calm precision. The pattern emerged clearly: racial profiling, excessive force, intimidation tactics. Throughout it all, Maddox's anger seemed to build like a pressure cooker. His breathing grew heavy, visible in the rise and fall of his chest. His eyes never left Harold, burning with undisguised hatred. But Harold's voice never wavered. He spoke with the steady authority of a man who had spent decades facing down such hatred, who understood that truth was his strongest weapon. Each answer was measured, each detail precise, building an irrefutable picture of systemic abuse. "One final question, Mr. Tate," Chen said. "Why did you choose to come forward with this testimony, knowing the potential risks?" Harold straightened in his chair, his dignity almost palpable. "Because silence in the face of injustice makes us complicit in that injustice. I've spent my life fighting for equal treatment under the law. That fight isn't over just because I'm retired." The gallery erupted in mixed reactions, muttered curses from Maddox's supporters. Soft sounds of agreement from Harold's side. Judge Carson's gavel cracked sharply. At the defense table, Maddox's hand moved toward his hip, then back to the table as his attorney grabbed his wrist. His face had transformed into a mask of pure fury, his composure completely shattered by Harold's quiet strength. Malcolm's phone lit up again. Maddox looking ready to explode. Dad calm as ever. Maddox's attorney rose from his chair, adjusting his tie with practiced smoothness. Harold could read the strategy in the lawyer's eyes. He'd seen it countless times before in courtrooms throughout his career. "Mr. Tate," the defense attorney began, his voice dripping with artificial concern, "you're 76 years old, correct?" "That's correct. And this incident you claim to have witnessed occurred after dark, at 8:30 p.m.? Harold nodded. "Yes. Under well-lit street lamps." The attorney paced slowly before the witness stand. "Mr. Tate, when was your last eye examination?" "Objection, Your Honor," Chen called out. "Relevance?" "Goes to the reliability of the witness's observations," the defense attorney replied. Judge Carson waved his hand. "I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Tate." 3 months ago, Harold replied calmly. "My prescription hasn't changed in 5 years. The defense attorney's smile tightened. "And you're certain about everything you claim to have seen that night? No possibility that your memory might be less sharp than it once was?" Harold met the attorney's gaze steadily. "My mind is quite clear, Counselor. Age hasn't diminished my ability to recognize abuse of power when I see it." A few quiet sounds of approval came from Harold's supporters. Maddox shifted in his chair, his uniform collar suddenly seeming too tight. "Let's talk about your history of accusations against law enforcement," the attorney continued. "You've filed numerous complaints against officers over the years, haven't you?" "I've documented civil rights violations when I've witnessed them, yes." "Isn't it true that most of these complaints were dismissed?" Harold's voice remained steady. "Many were dismissed without proper investigation. That's part of the problem we're addressing here today." The defense attorney's face reddened slightly. "Mr. Tate, isn't it possible that your long history of antagonism toward law enforcement has colored your perception of events?" "Objection!" Chen stood. Argumentative. "Sustained," Judge Carson ruled. Outside, Malcolm received another text. "Defense trying to discredit Dad." "Not working." The defense attorney changed tactics. "Mr. Tate, you mentioned Officer Maddox's known history with the community. Aren't you simply projecting your own biases onto my client?" "No, sir," Harold replied. "I base my testimony on direct observation and documented evidence, just as I did throughout my legal career." Maddox's chair creaked as he leaned forward, his face darkening further. His attorney shot him a warning glance before continuing. "And this video you took, why were you carrying your phone ready to record? Were you hoping to provoke a reaction from Officer Maddox?" Harold's voice remained calm, but took on an edge of steel. "I carry my phone because experience has taught me to document interactions with officers who abuse their authority. I wasn't hoping for anything except that Marcus Williams would make it home safely that night." The gallery stirred. Maddox's supporters muttered angrily, while Harold's side nodded in understanding. Judge Carson banged his gavel for order. "Isn't it true," the defense attorney pressed, "that you've been conducting a personal vendetta against Officer Maddox? That you've been following him, looking for any excuse to file complaints?" "Objection, Your Honor." Chen stood again. "Counsel is badgering the witness." "Overruled. The witness may answer." Harold straightened in his chair. "I don't conduct vendetta, Counselor. I observe, I document, I testify. That's how the law works, something I've dedicated my life to upholding." Officer Maddox's actions speak for themselves. At the defense table, Maddox's breathing had become audible, his chest heaving with barely contained rage. His attorney placed a warning hand on his arm, but Maddox shrugged it off. "You're lying!" Maddox suddenly shouted, his voice cracking with fury. "Officer Maddox, control yourself," Judge Carson warned, banging his gavel. The defense attorney tried to continue. "Mr. Tate, isn't it possible that at your age, in the dark—" "You self-righteous old bastard!" Maddox was on his feet now, his chair toppling backward. "You think you can sit there and destroy my life with your lies?" "Officer Maddox," the judge thundered, "sit down or I'll hold you in contempt." But Maddox was beyond hearing. His face had contorted into a mask of pure hatred, spittle flying as he shouted, "You people always think you're so smart, don't you? Think you can hide behind your fancy lawyer words?" Malcolm's phone exploded with urgent texts, but he was already moving, hearing the commotion through his earpiece. In one fluid motion, Maddox reached behind his back and pulled out a small handgun he'd somehow smuggled into the courtroom. The gallery erupted in screams as he pointed it directly at Harold. "Let's see how smart you are now, old man." The bailiff reached for his weapon, but froze when Maddox swung the gun in his direction before training it back on Harold. "Nobody move!" Harold remained perfectly still in the witness chair, his hands folded in his lap. His eyes fixed on the gun barrel pointing at his chest, but his expression showed no fear, only a deep, almost pitying understanding. The courtroom hung suspended in that terrible moment. The gallery had gone deathly silent. Judge Carson stood frozen behind his bench. The bailiff's hand hovered near his holster. Maddox's attorney had backed away, hands raised. The prosecutor stood halfway out of her chair, unable to move further. And through it all, Harold Tate sat straight-backed in the witness chair, looking down the barrel of Maddox's gun with the same quiet dignity he'd carried throughout his testimony. His eyes never wavered, even as the weapon trembled in Maddox's shaking hands. Time seemed to stop, the entire courtroom holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. The heavy courtroom doors burst open with a thunderous bang. Malcolm Tate stood in the doorway, his FBI badge gleaming in his outstretched left hand, his service weapon steady in his right. "Federal agent! Drop your weapon, Maddox! Now!" Maddox's head snapped toward the new threat, but his gun remained trained on Harold. Sweat beaded on his forehead as his eyes darted between father and son. "Stay back!" Maddox shouted, his voice cracking. "This isn't FBI business." Malcolm advanced into the courtroom with measured steps, his weapon never wavering from Maddox's center mass. "It became FBI business the moment you pulled that gun. Last warning. Drop it." The gallery had pressed themselves against the walls, leaving a clear line between Malcolm and Maddox. The bailiff, seeing backup arrive, drew his own weapon. "Officer Maddox," Harold's calm voice cut through the tension, "you don't want to make this worse than it already is." "Shut up!" Maddox's gun hand trembled more violently. "You don't tell me what I want." Malcolm took another step forward. "Think about what you're doing. You've got multiple weapons pointed at you. Put the gun down and we can talk this through." Judge Carson stood behind his bench, face flushed with anger. "Agent Tate, this is my courtroom. You have no jurisdiction." "There's a gun pointed at a federal witness, Your Honor." Malcolm cut him off, never taking his eyes off Maddox. "That makes it my jurisdiction." Two deputies had slipped in behind Malcolm, their weapons also drawn. Maddox was surrounded, but his finger remained tight on the trigger, gun still aimed at Harold's chest. "You're all against me," Maddox said through clenched teeth. "Always been against me, trying to tear down everything I've built." "Nobody's against you," Malcolm said, his voice firm but controlled. "But this ends now. Drop the weapon." Harold's hands remained folded in his lap, his dignity unshaken. "Listen to my son, Officer Maddox. There's still a way out of this." The moment stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. Then something in Maddox's eyes changed. His shoulders slumped slightly. The gun lowered an inch. "On your knees!" Malcolm commanded. "Do it now!" Maddox's gun clattered to the floor. The deputies rushed forward, roughly forcing him to his knees. One kicked the weapon away, while the other secured Maddox's hands behind his back. But before Malcolm could lower his weapon, Judge Carson's voice rang out. "Deputies, arrest Agent Tate and Mr. Tate for disrupting these proceedings." The courtroom erupted in confused shouts. Harold supporters jumped to their feet in protest, while Maddox's allies cheered. "What?" Malcolm kept his gun trained on Maddox. "Your Honor, that's completely—" "You burst into my courtroom unauthorized," Carson cut him off, "brandishing a weapon and interfering with official court business. Deputies, do your duty." Two more deputies approached Malcolm cautiously. "Sir, please surrender your weapon." Malcolm's jaw clenched. His eyes met his father's, and Harold gave him a slight nod. Slowly, Malcolm safeguarded his pistol and handed it over. "This is a mistake," he said, as the deputies took his arms. "I'm a federal agent responding to a threat." "You can explain that to the U.S. Marshal's office," Carson replied coldly. "For now, you're in contempt of my court." Harold stood calmly as deputies approached him with handcuffs. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "you're making a grave error in judgment." "The only error," Carson snapped, "was allowing this circus in my courtroom. Remove them both." The gallery watched in stunned silence as father and son were handcuffed. Maddox, still on his knees, managed a twisted smile despite his situation. His attorney was already approaching the bench, speaking quietly but urgently to Judge Carson. "Dad, are you okay?" Malcolm asked, as they were led toward the side door. "I'm fine, son," Harold replied evenly. "This isn't my first time in handcuffs for doing what's right." The prosecutor, Chen, rushed to intercept them. "Your Honor, I strongly object to this action. These men prevented—" "Noted and overruled," Carson declared. "This court is in recess until tomorrow morning." As they were escorted through the rear door into the holding area, Harold and Malcolm could hear the chaos erupting behind them. Their supporters were shouting in protest, while Carson's gavel banged repeatedly for order. The holding area was a stark contrast to the courtroom's polished wood and dignity. Just bare concrete walls and metal benches. The deputies directed them to sit, maintaining a respectful distance despite their orders. "Agent Tate," one deputy said quietly, "we had to follow the judge's order, but I want you to know, we saw what really happened in there." Malcolm nodded tightly, his handcuffs clinking as he sat beside his father. The heavy door clanged shut, leaving them alone in the holding cell. Through the small window in the door, they could hear the continued commotion from the courtroom. Judge Carson's voice carried even through the thick walls, ordering the gallery cleared. "I'm sorry, Dad," Malcolm said softly. "I should have been in there from the start." Harold shook his head. "You did exactly what you needed to do, son. Exactly when you needed to do it." He shifted slightly on the hard bench. "Though I admit, I didn't expect to be spending my afternoon in custody." "This won't stand," Malcolm assured him. "My team is already outside. They saw everything." "Of course it won't stand," Harold agreed calmly. "But that's not what Carson wants. He's buying time. Probably trying to figure out how to protect Maddox even now." They could hear boots in the corridor outside, voices conferring urgently. The small window darkened as someone peered in at them. "Quite a reunion," Harold said, with a hint of his old dry humor. "Not exactly how I planned to spend time with my son today." Malcolm managed a small smile despite the situation. "Well, you always said the best family bonding happens in unexpected places." The door's lock clunked as someone began to open it. The holding cell door opened to reveal a deputy with an apologetic expression. "Agent Tate, Mr. Tate, your attorney's here." Gloria Simmons swept in, her face tight with controlled anger. This is absolutely outrageous. I've already filed emergency motions with the federal court. The deputy cleared his throat. Ma'am, you have 15 minutes. Thank you, Deputy Williams, Gloria said, her tone softening slightly. Once the door closed, she turned to Harold and Malcolm. Are you both all right? We're fine, Harold assured her, more concerned about what's happening out there. Gloria pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the keys as she spoke. It's chaos. Judge Carson's trying to contain this, but he's too late. At least 20 people recorded Maddox pulling that gun. I've got the ACLU on standby and reporters from 3 major networks already calling. Malcolm leaned forward. My team? Outside, documenting everything. Agent Rivera's already contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. She looked up from her phone. But Carson's deputies are trying to confiscate phones from witnesses. They're claiming it's illegal to record in the courtroom. That's bull, Malcolm said. The Supreme Court's been clear on this. Public proceedings. Exactly, Gloria cut in. But they're using intimidation tactics. Threatening arrests, talking about contempt charges. She shook her head. Classic playbook. Create confusion. Seize evidence. Control the narrative. Harold shifted on the bench, the handcuffs clinking. How's Lewis? My driver? He's fine. He's actually been invaluable, helping coordinate with the protesters outside, keeping everyone calm. Gloria's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and smiled grimly. The National Lawyers Guild just confirmed. They're sending a team. The deputy knocked on the door. 5 minutes, Ms. Simmons. Malcolm straightened. Gloria, my badge and gun. Already on it. I've got your supervisor, A.S.A. Key Thompson, dealing directly with the U.S. Marshals. This jurisdiction nonsense won't fly. You were responding to a clear threat against a federal witness. The holding cell's dim fluorescent light flickered, casting strange shadows. Harold closed his eyes briefly, looking tired but resolute. Dad? Malcolm's voice held concern. I'm fine, son. Just thinking about your mother. She always said the truth has a way of coming to light. Gloria's phone buzzed again. She answered, speaking in rapid, hushed tones. After a moment, she ended the call and looked at them both. That was Reverend Jackson. They're organizing a vigil outside. News vans are already setting up. She checked her watch. It's going to be a long night. The door opened again. Time's up, Ms. Simmons. I'll be working straight through, Gloria told them, gathering her things. Judge Carson can't hold you indefinitely without charges. This will break, and when it does, she smiled fiercely. Well, let's just say I've got a few surprises ready. As she turned to leave, Harold called out softly, Gloria, thank you for everything. She paused at the door. Get some rest, both of you. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. The door closed with a heavy thunk, leaving father and son alone again. The cell grew quieter as evening settled in. Occasional shouts and chants from protesters outside filtered through the high, narrow window. Your team's good? Harold asked after a while. Malcolm nodded. The best. They've been tracking Maddox for months. This incident, he shook his head. It's horrible, but it's also exactly what we needed. No one can deny what happened in that courtroom today. Hours passed slowly. Deputies brought water and offered food, which they declined. Through the window's small opening, they could see the sky darkening, hear the crowd outside growing larger instead of dispersing. Around 11, they heard a commotion in the corridor. Raised voices, the sound of multiple boots on concrete. That's the last one, someone said. 12 phones confiscated. What about the woman who said she uploaded it already? Working on getting the account information. The voices faded. Malcolm and Harold exchanged knowing looks. Too late, Malcolm said quietly. It's already out there. You can't contain something like this anymore. Harold nodded. The world's changed. Carson and Maddox just haven't caught up yet. Near midnight, the door opened one final time. Gloria stood there, looking tired but determined. Deputy Williams was beside her. "Gentlemen," she said, "I'm heading out. But I want you to know, we've got 3 major civil rights organizations filing emergency briefs tonight. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund's team lands at 7 a.m. She smiled. "And someone leaked the courtroom video. It's trending nationwide." "Ms. Simmons," Deputy Williams said gently, "we need to lock up for the night." "Of course." She looked at Harold and Malcolm. "Try to rest. I'll be back first thing with reinforcements." The door closed again, leaving father and son in the dim cell. Outside, they could hear the deputy escorting Gloria down the corridor, her heels clicking on concrete, fading into silence. Malcolm shifted on the hard bench. "Dad?" "I'm proud of how you handled yourself up there. On the stand. Even with a gun in your face." Harold chuckled softly. "Well, your mother always said I was too stubborn to be scared." His voice grew serious. "But having you burst in like that, I've never been more proud, son. Or more worried." "I knew the risks," Malcolm said. "Some things are worth risking everything for." They fell silent, listening to the muffled sounds of the vigil outside. Hymns and civil rights songs floated through the window, a reminder that they weren't alone in this fight. Dawn crept through the holding cell's narrow window, painting stripes of pale light across the floor. Harold and Malcolm had dozed fitfully on the hard benches, still in their suits from yesterday. The sound of multiple voices in the corridor made them both sit up straight. "I want to see my clients immediately," Gloria's voice rang out, firm and clear. "Ma'am, visiting hours haven't—" a deputy started. "These are not visiting hours, Deputy Phillips. This is a legal consultation with multiple attorneys present. Or would you like to explain to Judge Martinez why you're obstructing counsel?" The cell door opened, revealing Gloria flanked by 3 distinguished attorneys. Harold's face lit up with recognition. "James? Marcus? Sarah?" He stood slowly. "I haven't seen you all since we shut down that segregated school district in '89, James Thompson finished, his silver hair gleaming in the fluorescent light. He stepped forward to embrace Harold. "Though I never thought we'd be meeting again under these circumstances." Sarah Chen, now a prominent civil rights attorney, was already pulling documents from her briefcase. "We've got the writ ready. Judge Martinez is waiting in her chambers." Marcus Washington, who'd argued dozens of cases alongside Harold in their younger days, gripped his old friend's shoulder. "The whole legal community's watching this one, Harold. That video of Maddox pulling his gun has over 2 million views." Malcolm straightened his tie as best he could with the handcuffs. "What's the situation with my team?" Gloria smiled. "Agent Rivera just called. They've secured the courthouse security footage. Full video, multiple angles. They're downloading it now." Deputy Phillips shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. "Ms. Simmons, I need to remind you that recording devices aren't—" "This is federal evidence now, Deputy," Sarah cut in smoothly. "Any attempt to interfere would constitute obstruction of justice." James pulled out his own papers. "Now, let's discuss this ridiculous detention. Harold and Malcolm Tate have been held for over 12 hours without formal charges. The writ demands their immediate release." Through the window, they could hear the growing crowd outside. News vans had begun arriving before sunrise, their satellite dishes visible against the purple-orange sky. "Your Honor," Marcus read from the document, "we seek immediate relief under both federal civil rights statutes and constitutional provisions. The detention of a federal agent responding to an imminent threat, and the imprisonment of a witness who was himself threatened with deadly force, represents a gross abuse of judicial authority." Gloria's phone buzzed. She checked it and nodded to Malcolm. "Your supervisor's here with the U.S. Marshals. They're taking jurisdiction." Deputy Phillips's radio crackled. "Phillips, get to the front entrance. Media's trying to set up in the parking lot." "Go," Gloria said. We know the way to Judge Martinez's chambers." The deputy hesitated, then hurried off. The legal team gathered their materials. "Harold," Sarah said softly, "are you ready for this? The press is waiting." "I've faced worse," Harold replied, standing straighter despite his exhaustion. "We all have." They made their way through the courthouse's morning shadows, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. Early arriving staff stopped to stare. Through the windows, they could see the crowd growing larger, protesters with signs, news crews setting up cameras, curious onlookers gathering at the edges. Judge Martinez's chambers were on the third floor. The distinguished Latina judge was already at her desk, reading through documents when they entered. "Your Honor," Gloria began. Save it, Counselor. I've been up all night watching this mess unfold." She looked up, her expression stern. "The writ is granted. Release them immediately." A marshal stepped forward with keys for the handcuffs. As they were being removed, Judge Martinez continued, "I'm also issuing an order preserving all evidence, including electronic communications, security footage, and any confiscated devices." She signed several papers with swift strokes. "And I'm referring this matter to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division." Malcolm rubbed his wrists. "Your Honor, my team is already coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office." She handed the signed orders to her clerk. "This jurisdiction is now under federal oversight." Through the windows, they could hear the crowd's volume increasing. More chants, more voices, more media trucks arriving. "Thank you, Your Honor," Harold said quietly. She looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Tate, I've read about your cases, the schools you integrated, the voting rights you protected. Yesterday, in that courtroom," she shook her head. "What happened to you was a disgrace to our justice system." "The system's only as good as the people in it," Harold replied. "And there are still good people." She nodded. "Go. Your supporters are waiting." The group made their way down to the main entrance. Through the glass doors, they could see the crowd had swelled significantly. News cameras were already pointed at the entrance, waiting. "Ready?" Gloria asked, straightening Harold's tie. Malcolm stood beside his father. Together. The doors opened. Camera flashes exploded. Microphones thrust forward. The crowd erupted in cheers and chants. "Mr. Tate! Mr. Tate! Agent Tate, what happens next? Will Officer Maddox be charged?" Harold and Malcolm stood side by side on the courthouse steps, their legal team flanking them. Gloria stepped to the microphones. "We'll be making a full statement shortly. For now, know that justice is being served. Harold and Malcolm Tate have been released, and federal authorities are now investigating yesterday's incident." The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps. Protesters held signs reading, "Justice for the Tates," and "No more corrupt cops." In the back of the crowd, Harold spotted his driver, Lewis, standing with members of his church. A reporter pushed forward. "Mr. Tate, how do you feel about what happened in that courtroom?" Harold looked at the sea of faces, cameras and microphones. He thought about all the battles he'd fought in courtrooms across the country, all the times he'd stood on steps like these over the decades. "What happened yesterday wasn't just about me or my son," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "It was about whether we'll allow fear and hatred to control our justice system, or whether we'll stand up and say, 'No more.'" The crowd cheered. Malcolm placed a hand on his father's shoulder, and together they faced the new day dawning over the courthouse steps. Malcolm sat in the dingy motel room, his laptop casting a blue glow across his face. His FBI credentials had helped secure the courthouse security footage within hours of their release. Now, sitting at the scratched wooden desk, he methodically reviewed each camera angle of yesterday's incident. "Dad, come look at this," Malcolm called to Harold, who was resting on one of the twin beds. Camera 3 captures everything perfectly. Harold moved slowly to join his son, his joints stiff from the holding cell's hard bench. On the screen, they watched the scene unfold again. Maddox's rising anger, the sudden movement, the gun appearing. "Send it," Harold said quietly. "People need to see." Malcolm nodded and began uploading the footage to secure servers. Within minutes, his phone buzzed with messages from major news outlets requesting permission to air it. "CNN's going live with it in 10 minutes, Malcolm said, checking his messages. "Fox, MSNBC, and ABC right after." Harold sank into the chair beside him. "How's the situation in town?" Malcolm switched tabs to the local police scanner feed. "Getting tense. Crowds growing outside the courthouse. Lot of angry people on both sides." The first notification popped up. "Breaking! Video shows officer pulling gun on elderly civil rights attorney in court." More alerts followed rapidly. Through the motel's thin walls, they could hear a TV from the next room switch to breaking news. A reporter's voice carried through. "Shocking footage from inside a small-town courtroom shows Officer Brent Maddox drawing his weapon on 76-year-old Harold Tate." Malcolm's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. FBI colleagues, journalists, civil rights organizations. Everyone wanted details. On his laptop screen, social media exploded with shares and outraged comments. "Look at these numbers," Malcolm muttered, refreshing the view counts. 200,000. 500,000. It's spreading fast. Harold watched the footage play again on CNN, his expression thoughtful. "Those people in the gallery, see how none of them moved to help? That tells a story, too." A text from Gloria appeared on Malcolm's phone. "Protests growing. Stay where you are. Some of Maddox's supporters getting violent downtown." Malcolm switched to local news live streams. Split-screen footage showed two crowds converging on the town square. One group carried Black Lives Matter signs and demanded justice. The other, smaller but more aggressive, waved thin blue line flags and chanted Maddox's name. "I shouldn't have brought you back here, Dad," Malcolm said, running a hand over his face. "Should have known how ugly it could get." Harold squeezed his son's shoulder. "This is exactly where I need to be. Some battles choose you." A knock at the door made them both tense. Malcolm drew his weapon and approached cautiously. "Room service," a voice called. "We didn't order anything," Malcolm replied firmly. "Compliments of Gloria," the voice answered. She called ahead. Malcolm checked through the peephole, then opened the door. A young hotel worker wheeled in a covered dinner cart, his eyes widening at Malcolm's badge and gun. After thoroughly checking the food, Malcolm let his father eat first, a habit from decades of civil rights work. They sat at the small table, the TV muted but showing endless loops of the courtroom footage. "Gloria's team is preparing injunctions," Harold said between bites of lukewarm pasta. "Federal oversight's good, but we need more. Pattern and practice investigation, consent decree." Malcolm nodded, checking his phone again. "My supervisor's pushing for a full task force. This goes beyond Maddox now. The whole department's implicated." The local news shifted to aerial footage of downtown. The crowds had grown larger, filling several blocks. Police in riot gear formed lines between the opposing groups. "They're scared," Harold observed, watching the scenes unfold. "Not just Maddox and his supporters. The whole power structure. They see what's coming." Malcolm's laptop pinged with new alerts. The footage had passed 5 million views. Hashtags were trending. "Justice for Harold Tate," "Maddox must go," "Courtroom crime." "National Guards on standby," Malcolm reported, scanning updates. "Governor's making a statement in an hour." Harold pushed his plate away and walked to the window. Through the gap in the curtains he could see the motel's parking lot, now half filled with unmarked FBI vehicles providing security. "Remember when you were little," Harold said, still looking out, "and you asked why I kept fighting cases even after your mother passed? Why I didn't just retire somewhere quiet? Malcolm looked up from his screens. You said someone had to stand in the gap. That's right. Harold turned back to his son. Because if good people step aside, the Maddoxes of the world step in. Simple as that. A notification sound drew their attention back to the laptop. The view count had passed 10 million. Comments flooded in from around the world. The footage had gone truly viral. Malcolm opened a new message from his team. Recovered deleted texts between Maddox and other officers, planning more than intimidation. Full briefing tomorrow. He showed it to his father. Harold nodded slowly. Not surprised. Men like that don't act alone. They need a system that protects them. On the TV, split-screen coverage showed protests spreading to other cities. The story had struck a nerve, becoming a symbol of larger issues. Get some rest, Dad, Malcolm said, noticing Harold's exhaustion. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. Harold moved to his bed, but didn't lie down. He sat watching the muted coverage, his expression determined despite his fatigue. Malcolm turned back to his laptop, monitoring the growing online reaction. Every refresh showed higher numbers, more shares, increasing outrage. The truth was spreading, pixel by pixel, screen by screen, reaching millions. Outside, the sun had set on their small town, but its story was just beginning to illuminate screens across the nation. In the soft glow of their motel room, father and son watched as their private struggle for justice became a national demand for change. The footage played again on the TV. A gun drawn, a brave man standing firm, a son rushing to protect his father. Over and over, America watched. And finally, they saw. Dawn broke over the small town as Malcolm sat in the motel's business center, surrounded by stacks of documents. His laptop was open to a secure Department of Justice portal, the complaint form displayed on screen. Behind him, Harold reviewed printed copies of witness statements collected overnight. Each testimony matches perfectly, Harold said, shuffling through papers. No contradictions about what happened in that courtroom. Malcolm nodded, typing rapidly. Adding the timestamps from the security footage now. Cross-referencing with body cam numbers. He paused, rubbing his tired eyes. DOJ's going to have a field day with this. The door opened and Gloria strode in, carrying a thick manila envelope. Her usually neat appearance showed signs of an all-night work session. Found something, she announced, spreading contents across the table. Court clerk owed me a favor. These were sealed. Cases involving Maddox going back 15 years. Malcolm leaned forward, scanning the documents. Excessive force complaints, racial profiling, witness intimidation. His jaw tightened. All buried. Not anymore, Gloria said grimly. She pointed to signature lines at the bottom of several forms. See who signed off on sealing these? Same judge who had you both arrested yesterday. Harold adjusted his reading glasses, examining the papers. Pattern of corruption. Each case disappeared before it could reach a hearing. Malcolm's phone buzzed. A text from his FBI team outside. Crowds gathering at the courthouse again. Bigger than yesterday. Gloria turned on the small TV mounted in the corner. Local news showed aerial footage of people filling the streets, many carrying signs. Arrest Maddox now, and no justice, no peace. We need to move fast, Gloria said, organizing documents into her briefcase. I've got a team digitizing everything we found, ready to file emergency motions within the hour. Malcolm finished typing and hit submit on the DOJ complaint. Done. Federal investigation officially requested. He checked his watch. My supervisor says the Civil Rights Division's already reviewing yesterday's footage. Harold stood by the window, watching FBI vehicles patrol the motel parking lot. The people need to hear the truth. Not just see the video, but understand what it means. Gloria paused her rapid paper sorting. What are you thinking? I want to record a message, Harold said. something direct, from the heart. Help them see beyond the anger. Malcolm and Gloria exchanged glances. They knew that voice, Harold's quiet determination that had won so many crucial cases over the decades. "We can set it up right here," Gloria said, pulling out her phone. "I'll handle the upload myself. Make sure it can't be taken down." Malcolm cleared space on the conference table while Gloria positioned chairs and adjusted lighting. Harold sat down, took a moment to collect his thoughts, then nodded. Gloria held up her phone and pressed record. "My name is Harold Tate," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Yesterday, in our town's courthouse, an officer of the law pointed his gun at me because he feared the truth I was telling." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I've spent my life fighting for justice in courtrooms across this country. I've seen progress and setbacks. But what happened yesterday wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's ever faced a choice between speaking up or staying silent." Through the window, they could hear the distant sound of protesters chanting. "To those gathering at the courthouse, I hear you. I see your anger, and it's justified. But remember this: our strength lies not in hatred, but in unity. Not in violence, but in truth." Harold leaned forward slightly, his eyes intense. "To Officer Maddox and those who protect him, your actions have exposed a system that betrays the very law you swore to uphold. The world is watching now. Change is coming, not through force, but through justice." Malcolm watched his father speak, reminded of countless civil rights speeches he'd heard as a child. "To my neighbors, all of them, we share this town. Its future belongs to all of us. The path forward isn't through division. It's through facing hard truths together and demanding better from those who serve us." Harold's voice grew softer, but no less powerful. "I'm 76 years old. I've seen too much hatred, too much fear. But I've also seen what happens when people of conscience stand together. That's why I'm still here. That's why I'll keep testifying. That's why we can't stop until justice is more than just a word in a courtroom." He straightened in his chair, dignified despite his exhaustion. "The truth cannot be silenced by a gun. Right cannot be locked away in a cell. And justice is coming." Gloria stopped recording. For a moment, no one spoke. Malcolm squeezed his father's shoulder. "That's exactly what people need to hear." Gloria was already working on her phone. "Uploading now. I'm sending it to every contact I have. Media, civil rights groups, community leaders." Through the window, they could see more news vans arriving at the courthouse. The crowd had grown larger, their chants louder. "How long until the DOJ responds?" Harold asked, watching the scene outside. Malcolm checked his secure messages. "They're expediting everything. This goes way beyond a single incident now." Gloria's phone started buzzing with notifications. "The video's going up everywhere. People are sharing it fast." Harold nodded, still watching the growing crowd through the window. Years of experience had taught him that moments like this could change everything. Or change nothing. It all depended on what happened next. Below, protesters continued to gather, their signs visible even from the motel's second floor. Their voices rose in unified demand for justice, echoing through the streets of a town that could no longer hide from its truth. Darkness settled over the town as Harold sat in his motel room, watching news coverage of the day's events. His recorded message had spread rapidly online, drawing both support and backlash. Malcolm paced near the window, periodically checking his phone and the parking lot below. A sudden orange glow caught Harold's attention. On the TV, breaking news interrupted the regular broadcast. "We're live downtown where flames have erupted at the county courthouse," the reporter announced, her face illuminated by the growing fire behind her. "Firefighters are responding, but witnesses report seeing several individuals fleeing the scene moments before the blaze began. Malcolm's phone rang. "Tate here," he answered sharply. His expression darkened as he listened. "Understood. Keep me posted." He turned to his father. "That was my team." Witnesses saw Maddox's supporters throwing Molotov cocktails through the basement windows. Harold stood slowly, his joints stiff from the long day. "The evidence. Most of it's digital now," Malcolm assured him. "Gloria made sure." Urgent knocking cut him off. Malcolm drew his weapon and approached the door cautiously, checking the peephole. He relaxed slightly, recognizing Gloria's face, and opened the door. She burst in, still wearing her court suit from earlier, but now disheveled. "They're burning everything," she said breathlessly. "Records, files, anything paper. Sheriff's deputies are just standing there watching it burn." Malcolm helped her to a chair. "What else?" "Maddox's people are getting violent. They're roaming the streets in trucks, threatening anyone who speaks against him." Gloria pulled out her phone, showing them social media posts. "They're calling for citizens' arrests of race traitors and outside agitators." Harold watched the courthouse burn on TV, flames now visible through the historic building's windows. "History repeating itself," he murmured. "They'd rather destroy it all than face the truth." Malcolm's phone buzzed again, a text from one of his FBI contacts. His face hardened as he read it. "We need to move," he said, already gathering their belongings. "Now." "What is it?" Harold asked. "Source inside the sheriff's office. Weaver's planning a midnight raid. They're drawing up warrants claiming we incited today's protests." Malcolm checked his watch. "They'll be here within the hour." Gloria stood. "I've got a place ready. Civil rights organization maintains safe houses for situations like this. My colleague's waiting there now." "No," Malcolm said, pulling out a secure phone. "Too risky. Sheriff's office probably has those locations watched." He dialed quickly. "This is Special Agent Tate, authorization code Delta 793. I need immediate extraction for 2 principals." Harold methodically packed his briefcase, while Malcolm coordinated with his FBI team. Decades of civil rights work had taught him the importance of staying calm in moments like this. Gloria helped gather documents scattered across the room. "They're desperate," she said. "Burning the courthouse, planning false arrests. They know they're losing control." Headlights swept across the window as vehicles pulled into the motel parking lot. Malcolm peered through the curtain. "Sheriff's cruiser doing a drive-by. We've got maybe 30 minutes." More emergency vehicles' sirens wailed in the distance. The TV showed the courthouse fire spreading to adjacent buildings while firefighters struggled to contain it. Malcolm's secure phone chirped. "Extraction teams 8 minutes out. Back entrance of the motel. We'll take separate vehicles to throw off any tails." Harold zipped his suitcase. "Gloria, you should go. Don't want you caught up in this." She shook her head firmly. "I promised Sarah I'd look after you," she said, invoking Harold's late wife's name. "I'm seeing this through." Footsteps in the hallway made them freeze. Malcolm motioned everyone away from the door, drawing his weapon again. The footsteps passed, but the message was clear. Time was running out. Harold moved to the window, watching emergency lights paint the town in surreal colors. The courthouse fire had become a blazing beacon, its flames reflecting off low-hanging clouds. "Dad," Malcolm said softly, "we need to go." They turned off all lights and moved silently through the room, gathering the last of their belongings. Malcolm checked the hallway, then nodded. They slipped out, Gloria leading the way toward the back stairs. The night air was thick with smoke as they emerged into the parking lot. Malcolm's phone vibrated, a signal from his team. 2 unmarked SUVs glided into view, running dark. "Gloria, take my father in the first vehicle," Malcolm directed. "I'll follow in the second. If we get separated, maintain radio silence until you reach the safe house." Harold hugged Gloria quickly, then turned to his son. "Be careful." "You too, Dad." Malcolm squeezed his father's shoulder. "See you soon." They had just started toward the vehicles when a spotlight suddenly illuminated the parking lot. "This is the sheriff's department," a voice boomed through a megaphone. "Stay where you are." "Go!" Malcolm shouted, drawing his weapon as cruisers appeared, blocking the lot's entrance. The FBI drivers reacted instantly. Both SUVs reversed sharply, creating a barrier between the group and the approaching deputies. Harold and Gloria rushed to the first vehicle while Malcolm provided cover. "Federal agent!" Malcolm called out. "These people are under FBI protection." More cruisers arrived, sirens wailing. The SUV's driver pulled Harold and Gloria inside as shots rang out. Warning shots fired over their heads. Malcolm backed toward the second vehicle, badge held high. "Cease fire! Cease fire! You're interfering with a federal investigation." Through the SUV's window, Harold watched his son, heart pounding. The moment stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. Then both FBI vehicles surged backward, tires squealing, using a maintenance road behind the motel. Harold glimpsed Malcolm diving into the second SUV before they accelerated into the pre-dawn darkness. Gloria gripped Harold's hand as their driver executed a series of rapid turns, losing any potential tails. In the distance, the courthouse fire painted the sky orange, marking the end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another. The SUVs raced through empty streets, carrying their passengers toward safety, as the first hints of dawn began to pale the eastern sky. Dawn crept over the pine trees surrounding the FBI safe house. Harold sat at a kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm coffee mug, while Malcolm checked the perimeter for the third time since their arrival. Gloria dozed on a worn couch, her laptop still open beside her. The house was simple but secure, a single-story ranch tucked away on a private road, surrounded by dense forest. Blackout curtains covered every window, and surveillance cameras monitored the long driveway. Malcolm returned from his check, rolling tension from his shoulders. "Perimeter's clear. Our teams have blockades on all access roads." Harold nodded, taking a slow sip of coffee. His hands still trembled slightly from the night's events. "Any word on the courthouse? Fire's contained, but the building's a total loss." Malcolm pulled out his phone, showing his father news footage. "They're calling it arson. Multiple ignition points, accelerants used." Gloria stirred at their voices, sitting up and straightening her wrinkled blazer. "What time is it?" "Just past 6, Harold answered. "You should get more rest." She shook her head, reaching for her own coffee cup. "Too much happening. My contacts in D.C. have been working all night." Malcolm's secure phone buzzed. He answered immediately, listening intently. His expression shifted from concern to cautious hope. "Good news?" Harold asked as his son ended the call. "The Attorney General just authorized a federal task force. They're mobilizing now. Civil rights investigators, FBI tactical teams, federal marshals." Malcolm allowed himself a small smile. "That video of Maddox pulling his gun went viral. Social media's exploding. National news networks are all over it." Gloria opened her laptop, quickly scanning headlines. "Look at this. Civil rights groups are organizing caravans to the town. Protesters from 3 states are heading in. The governor's getting pressure to make a statement." Harold closed his eyes briefly, memories washing over him. Feels like 65 all over again. Same hatred, different faces. A sharp alert tone from Malcolm's phone interrupted them. He checked the message, brow furrowing. "What is it?" Gloria asked. "Contact inside the sheriff's office wants to meet. Says they have recordings, conversations between Maddox and Judge Copeland about intimidating Dad on the stand." Malcolm showed them the message. "Says they planned the whole thing." Harold leaned forward. "Can we trust them?" Message came through our secure whistleblower channel. They provided authentication codes that check out. Malcolm typed a response. "They're requesting immediate extraction. afraid of retaliation. Gloria stood, suddenly energized. If we have proof of conspiracy between Maddox and the judge, that breaks this wide open. Federal charges, civil rights violations, witness intimidation. Malcolm was already coordinating with his team. Sending a tactical unit now. We'll bring them straight here. The next hour passed tensely. Harold tried to rest but found himself standing at the kitchen window, peering through a gap in the curtains at the misty morning. Gloria worked her phone, coordinating with legal teams and civil rights organizations. Malcolm remained in constant contact with his extraction team. Finally, Malcolm's phone lit up. They're 5 minutes out. 2 vehicles, our tactical team, and the witness. Harold watched his son move efficiently through the house, checking security measures and positioning himself near the front door. Even after all these years, it still startled him sometimes to see his little boy transformed into this capable federal agent. Gravel crunched under tires as 2 black SUVs pulled up to the house. Malcolm verified their identification through the security system, then opened the door. 4 FBI agents in tactical gear emerged from the first vehicle, immediately taking up defensive positions. From the second SUV stepped a nervous-looking young woman in a sheriff's department uniform. "Deputy Sarah Chen," she introduced herself as Malcolm led her inside. I was Judge Copeland's clerk." Harold recognized her from the courthouse. She'd always been polite, one of the few staff members who looked him in the eye. "You're safe here," Gloria assured her, pulling out a chair. "Tell us what you have." Deputy Chen produced a small digital recorder from her pocket. "I started recording their meetings 3 months ago, when I realized what they were planning." Her hands shook slightly. Judge Copeland and Officer Maddox would meet in chambers after hours. They knew Mr. Tate's testimony could expose everything. Malcolm took the recorder, connecting it to secure equipment to make copies. Everything meaning? Years of covered-up misconduct, falsified reports, evidence tampering. Chen's voice grew stronger as she spoke. They targeted black residents, activists, anyone who challenged them. Judge Copeland would throw out complaints, seal records, whatever it took to protect Maddox and others like him. The first recording began to play. Judge Copeland's distinctive drawl filled the room. "That old civil rights lawyer needs to learn his place. When he takes the stand, Maddox, you make sure he understands the consequences of running his mouth." Maddox's voice responded. "Don't worry, Judge. By the time I'm done, won't nobody else dare testify against us." Harold listened, face impassive, as more conversations played. The casual cruelty, the calculated planning, the absolute certainty of their power. He'd seen it all before. "There's more," Chen said. "Videos from the courthouse security system, emails, text messages. I downloaded everything before." She paused. "Before they burned it all." Malcolm's team began processing the evidence, while Gloria took detailed notes. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. "Why?" Harold asked quietly. "Why come forward now?" Chen met his eyes. "Because I watched you on that stand, sir. Watched you tell the truth while they tried to destroy you. And I realized I couldn't be part of it anymore." Malcolm's phone buzzed again. "Task force just landed at the regional airport," he announced. "They'll be in town within the hour." Gloria was already drafting motions. "With this evidence, we can request immediate federal intervention, demand the judge's recusal, have Maddox's badge suspended." "They'll come after me," Chen said softly. "No, they won't," Malcolm assured her. "You're under federal protection now. We're moving you to a secure location as soon as the task force arrives." Harold reached across the table, gently patting Chen's hand. "Thank you. What you've done today, it matters. It's how change happens. One person standing up, then another, then another." Morning light slipped through the curtains as they worked, organizing evidence and preparing statements. The recorder continued playing, revealing years of corruption in the judge's own words. Outside, more FBI vehicles arrived, securing the perimeter as the town awakened to find justice finally closing in. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the safe house windows as Malcolm set up his mobile forensics equipment on the dining room table. Deputy Chen sat beside him, providing login credentials and system details, while Harold and Gloria worked in the living room, preparing documents for the next day's press conference. Maddox thought he was clever, Chen explained, watching Malcolm's fingers fly across the keyboard. He'd delete his body cam footage at the end of every shift, then submit technical malfunction reports. Malcolm nodded, eyes fixed on the screen. But deleted doesn't mean gone, not with the right tools. He connected a series of external drives and processors. The footage gets archived to the department's secure server first. Even if he deleted local copies, there's always a digital trail. From the living room, Gloria's voice carried over. Make sure we have solid chain of custody documentation for everything. They'll try to challenge authenticity. Already on it, Malcolm replied. He turned to Chen. When exactly did Maddox start making threats about the trial? Chen consulted her notes. 3 weeks ago. He was getting nervous about Harold's testimony. Started wearing his body cam more often, trying to catch your father doing something he could use against him. Malcolm's computer beeped. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as his recovery program worked. Got something. Multiple deleted files from the days leading up to the trial. Harold walked over, leaning on his cane. What does it show? The first recovered video appeared. Maddox's body cam footage showed him following Harold's car, lights flashing. Harold's driver, Lewis, pulled over carefully. Remember this? Malcolm asked his father. Harold's face tightened. Week before the trial. He claimed it was a routine traffic stop. The footage played, showing Maddox approaching the car aggressively, hand on his weapon. His voice came through clearly. Getting mighty brave. Testifying against a police officer. Be a shame if something happened to you on these dark roads. There's more, Chen said quietly. File after file appeared. Maddox parking outside Harold's house, following him to the grocery store, showing up at his church. Each encounter captured threats and intimidation, all while his body cam recorded everything. He got sloppy, Malcolm noted, copying the files to secure drives. Too angry to remember his camera was running, too confident to care. Gloria joined them, watching the footage with growing intensity. This is textbook witness intimidation, criminal harassment, civil rights violations. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling the DOJ task force leader now. They need to see this before tomorrow's press conference. While Gloria made calls, Malcolm's FBI tech team arrived. 3 agents with additional equipment. They set up quickly, processing the videos and creating certified copies. Timestamp on this one agent called out. Morning of the trial. Courthouse parking lot. The footage showed Maddox meeting Judge Copeland behind the courthouse. The judge's words were clear. If that old troublemaker doesn't back down, handle it. Make it look clean. Harold watched silently, his expression pained but unsurprised. Chen touched his arm gently. I'm so sorry, Mr. Tate. I should have come forward sooner. He patted her hand. You came forward when it mattered most. That's what counts. Gloria returned, energy radiating from her. DOJ wants everything we have by midnight. Press conference is set for 9 a.m. tomorrow at the Federal Building downtown. She looked at Malcolm. They're sending extra security for all of us. Tactical teams will escort us there. Malcolm nodded, still focused on recovery operations. Almost done here. Just a few more files to process. His screen flickered with another recovered video, this one from inside the courtroom, showing Maddox's perspective as he drew his weapon. The room fell silent as they watched. The angle captured everything: Harold's calm testimony, Maddox's rising fury the moment he snapped. The racial slur he shouted echoed in the quiet room. "Perfect," Gloria said grimly. "Jury's going to see exactly what happened. No spinning this." For the next several hours, they worked steadily. Malcolm's team processed and authenticated every piece of footage. Gloria drafted statements and coordinated with DOJ prosecutors. Harold helped Chen prepare her formal whistleblower testimony. Night fell. Takeout containers littered the table. Coffee cups multiplied. Outside, FBI vehicles patrolled silently. "That's the last one," Malcolm announced finally, securing the final drive. He checked his watch, 11:45 p.m. "Everything's copied, authenticated, and encrypted. DOJ will have it within the hour." Gloria looked up from her laptop. "Press packets are ready. I've got statements prepared for Harold, Deputy Chen, and the DOJ team." She stretched, rolling her shoulders. "News vans are already setting up outside the federal building. This is going to be big." "You should all try to rest," Malcolm said, looking particularly at his father. "Tomorrow will be intense." Harold nodded slowly. "Reminds me of the night before the Selma March. Same feeling in the air, like standing on the edge of something important." Chen, who had been quiet for a while, spoke up. "Do you think it will make a difference? Really change things?" "It already has," Harold answered. "You stood up. Others will follow. That's how the light gets in." Malcolm secured the last of the equipment, while Gloria made final calls to her legal team. The house settled into late-night quiet, broken only by the soft hum of computers and the occasional crackle of radio traffic from the security teams outside. Chen was shown to a safe room to rest. Gloria claimed the couch, legal papers spread around her. Malcolm did one last security check, then returned to find his father still sitting at the dining room table. "You should sleep, Dad." Harold smiled slightly. "Too much on my mind." He looked at the stack of hard drives containing the evidence. All those years of abuse, caught on their own cameras. They were so certain of their power they didn't even try to hide it. Malcolm sat beside him. That's what brought them down. Pride, arrogance. He touched his father's shoulder. "Get some rest. I'll wake you before we head out." "In a minute." Harold's fingers traced the edge of the table. "Your mother would be proud, you know. Seeing you stand up in that courtroom, protecting me, watching you fight for justice. The right way." Malcolm felt his throat tighten. "I learned from the best." They sat together in comfortable silence as midnight approached. Outside, crickets chirped in the darkness. Inside, the evidence that would change everything waited, ready for morning's light. Dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges as the convoy assembled. 4 black FBI SUVs flanked a central armored vehicle where Harold, Malcolm, and Gloria sat. Teams of federal agents checked weapons and radios, their faces set with determination. "Control to all units," crackled the radio. "Route is secure. Beginning movement to target location." Malcolm sat beside his father, both men dressed in crisp suits. Gloria reviewed her notes one final time, her reading glasses perched on her nose. The weight of the evidence, stored safely in a reinforced case between Malcolm's feet, seemed to fill the vehicle with purpose. 5 minutes to town limits, the driver announced. Harold straightened his tie, his movements deliberate and calm. "Quite a difference from yesterday's escape, isn't it?" "This time we have backup," Malcolm said, checking his phone. "DOJ teams are already in position. Warrants are signed and ready." The convoy crossed into town just as the sun cleared the horizon. Already crowds lined the streets, a stark division visible between them. On one side, supporters held signs demanding justice, their faces hopeful. On the other, angry protesters waved Confederate flags and shouted obscenities. "Crowd control units in place," the radio reported. "Path to courthouse remains clear." They drove past familiar landmarks. The diner where Harold used to meet civil rights workers in the 60s. The church where he taught Sunday school. The park where he'd once been arrested for sitting at a whites-only bench. Now, decades later, he was returning to face down the same hatred, wrapped in new uniforms but unchanged at its core. The courthouse came into view. News vans crowded the parking lot, satellite dishes reaching skyward. A podium had been set up on the steps, ringed by federal agents. Behind it, yellow crime scene tape still marked where the fire had damaged one wing of the building. "Look at that crowd," Gloria whispered, peering through tinted windows. Hundreds of people pressed against security barriers. National media teams jostled for position. Civil rights leaders stood ready with megaphones. Local residents watched from shop windows and sidewalks, their expressions a mix of fear and anticipation. The convoy stopped. Federal agents moved into formation around their vehicle. "Ready?" Malcolm asked, gripping the evidence case. Harold nodded. "Been ready for 50 years. They emerged into morning sunlight and camera flashes. The crowd roared, cheers and boos colliding in the air. Gloria led the way up the courthouse steps, her head high. Malcolm stayed close to his father, scanning constantly for threats. At the podium, the DOJ task force leader waited. He shook their hands, then stepped to the microphone. "Good morning. We're here today to announce the results of a federal investigation into systemic corruption and civil rights violations within this county's justice system." Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Harold stood tall beside the podium, his presence commanding respect. Malcolm positioned himself slightly behind, one hand near his weapon, the other holding the case. "Before we proceed with arrests, we'll present key evidence uncovered by FBI Special Agent Malcolm Tate and his team." Malcolm stepped forward, opening the case. He connected a laptop to the large screens set up behind the podium. The crowd hushed as the first video began to play. Maddox's face filled the screen, his body cam capturing every hateful word as he threatened Harold. The crowd gasped at his casual racism, his brutal intimidation. More footage followed. The secret meeting with Judge Copeland, the conspiracy to silence testimony, the courtroom assault. Angry shouts erupted from the crowd. Signs waved. Federal agents tensed. "Based on this evidence," the task force leader continued, "we are executing federal warrants for the arrest of Officer Brent Maddox, Judge Henry Copeland, and 6 members of the County Sheriff's Department." As if on cue, a team of agents emerged from the courthouse, leading Maddox in handcuffs. His face was red with rage. Judge Copeland followed, his judicial dignity stripped away, shoulders slumped in defeat. Deputies who had helped cover up their crimes came next, heads bowed. The crowd's reaction was instant and explosive. Supporters cheered and embraced. Maddox's backers shouted threats and pressed against the barriers. Federal agents moved quickly to maintain order. Harold stepped to the microphone. His voice, strong and clear, cut through the chaos. 50 years ago, I stood on these steps as a young lawyer, fighting for justice. Today, I stand here as a witness to change, not just for myself, but for every person who has faced hatred and survived, for every voice that was silenced, for every truth that was buried. The crowd grew quiet, hanging on his words. To those who thought their badges and gavels made them untouchable, justice has come. To those who lived in fear, fear no more. The light of truth will always overcome the darkness of hatred. Gloria wiped tears from her eyes. Even hardened federal agents seemed moved. Malcolm watched his father with pride, remembering the terrifying moment in the courtroom when he'd burst in to find Maddox's gun aimed at him. Now, just days later, they stood victorious on the same steps. As Harold finished speaking, the task force leader returned to announce additional investigations, federal oversight measures, and support for community healing. But the crowd's attention stayed fixed on Harold, the man who had stood his ground, who had never lost faith in justice. When the formal statements ended, Harold turned to Malcolm. Their embrace was spontaneous and powerful. A father and son united in triumph. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. "I love you, Dad," Malcolm said softly. "Love you too, son," Harold replied, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it. We really did it." Around them, supporters pressed forward, reaching to shake their hands. Cameras flashed. Reporters called questions. But for that moment, in the morning sunlight on the courthouse steps, father and son held on to their hard-won victory, surrounded by the sounds of justice finally served. A week after the courthouse arrests, Harold sat in his study, adjusting his tie as Gloria helped set up the video equipment for his congressional testimony. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the family photos and legal texts that lined his shelves. "Testing, 1, 2, a technician said through the screen. "Can you hear us clearly, Mr. Tate?" "Yes, perfectly," Harold replied, his voice steady and clear. Malcolm entered, carrying a fresh cup of coffee for his father. "5 minutes until you're live, Dad. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been preparing for this moment my whole life," Harold said, accepting the coffee with a grateful nod. The screen flickered to life, showing the House Judiciary Committee chamber. Representatives sat in tiered rows, their faces serious as they shuffled papers and whispered to aides. News cameras lined the back wall. "Mr. Tate," the committee chair began, "thank you for joining us today. Please proceed with your opening statement." Harold leaned forward slightly, his presence commanding even through the screen. "Distinguished members of Congress, I come before you not just as a victim of injustice, but as a witness to a system that has failed countless Americans in small towns across our nation." As Harold testified, Malcolm's phone buzzed with updates from his team in the field. More arrests were happening. County commissioners who had approved illegal policies, clerks who had destroyed evidence, deputies who had intimidated witnesses. The corrupt network was falling apart, thread by thread. "Officer Maddox's gun wasn't just pointed at me that day," Harold continued, his voice growing stronger. "It was pointed at every citizen who dares to speak truth to power. Every person who believes in justice. Every community that dreams of change." Committee members nodded, some taking notes. Others looked visibly moved. "We need federal oversight of small-town justice systems," Harold urged. "We need protection for whistleblowers. We need accountability that reaches beyond county lines and local loyalties. Because without these safeguards, what happened in our town will keep happening across America." Questions from representatives followed, and Harold answered each with the same careful precision he'd shown throughout his legal career. He shared statistics, cited cases, and painted vivid pictures of systemic abuse. Meanwhile, across town, Malcolm coordinated with the federal oversight team. They seized records, interviewed witnesses, and tracked money trails that exposed decades of corruption. In the sheriff's office, FBI agents installed new monitoring systems and established direct lines to federal authorities. "Another batch of warrants just came through," Malcolm's deputy reported, handing him a stack of papers, "including some for officials in neighboring counties." "The rot spread further than we thought," Malcolm said, signing the authorizations. "But we're cutting it out, root and branch." Back at Harold's house, the congressional testimony stretched into its third hour. Representatives from both parties praised his courage and pressed for details about needed reforms. "Final question, Mr. Tate," the chair said. "What gives you hope that real change is possible?" Harold smiled, thinking of the transformations he'd already witnessed. "Because I've seen it happen. Right now, in my town, people who once turned away are standing up. Those who were silent are finding their voices. Change isn't just possible. It's inevitable when good people refuse to back down. As the hearing concluded, representatives gave Harold a standing ovation. Gloria wiped tears from her eyes as she helped disconnect the equipment. "You did it, Harold," she said softly. "You made them listen." "We all did," Harold replied, standing slowly. "Every person who stood with us, who risked speaking out. This victory belongs to all of them." The doorbell rang. Malcolm answered it to find neighbors gathering on the front lawn, holding welcome home signs and American flags. Many were faces he recognized from town, people who had previously avoided eye contact, crossed the street, or whispered behind their hands. "Mr. Tate," called Mrs. Johnson from next door, who had lived beside them for 30 years but rarely spoke. "We watched your testimony. We're so proud to be your neighbors." Harold stepped onto his porch, Malcolm at his side. The crowd cheered, not the angry roar of protesters, but the warm sound of community coming together. "Look at that," Harold said quietly to his son. "Sometimes justice changes more than just laws. It changes hearts." Children ran playing across the lawn, their parents no longer pulling them away. Elderly residents who had witnessed the town's darkest days wiped tears from their eyes. Young people recorded the moment on their phones, proud to document history being made. A group of high school students approached with a handmade banner. "Thank you, Mr. Tate, for teaching us courage." Harold descended his porch steps slowly, greeting each person, shaking hands, accepting hugs. Some apologized for past silences. Others shared their own stories of facing discrimination. All expressed gratitude for the changes sweeping through their town. Malcolm watched his father move through the crowd, marveling at how naturally he turned this moment of personal triumph into an opportunity for community healing. Even now, Harold was teaching, not through lectures, but through living example. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gathering as neighbors shared food and stories on Harold's lawn. Children played together regardless of color. Former antagonists found common ground in their hopes for a better future. The sight would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. "Your mother would have loved to see this," Malcolm said, joining his father on a garden bench. Harold nodded, watching the scene before them. "She always said justice was like planting a garden. You have to prepare the soil, plant the seeds, and tend it carefully. But one day, if you don't give up, everything blooms." Around them, their small town was blooming. Not perfectly, not completely, but unmistakably. The changes they'd fought for were taking root, growing stronger with each passing day. 6 months had transformed their small town. On a bright autumn morning, Harold adjusted his best suit, the new one Malcolm had insisted on buying him for today's ceremony. The courthouse steps, once a place of confrontation, now bustled with excited citizens gathering for a historic moment. "Ready, Dad?" Malcolm asked, straightening his FBI pin. "More than ready," Harold replied, his eyes bright. "Been waiting decades for a day like this." They made their way through the crowd, receiving warm greetings from all sides. Children waved from their parents' shoulders. Elderly residents nodded respectfully. Even former critics offered genuine smiles. The podium stood where protest signs had once been raised. Captain Regina Williams, soon to be Chief Williams, waited nearby, reviewing her speech notes. She'd been one of their quiet allies during the darkest days, secretly passing information while maintaining her position within the department. Harold remembered how she'd slipped him warning notes through trusted contacts, how she'd preserved evidence others tried to destroy. Her patience and strategy had helped build the case that brought down the old guard. "Mr. Tate," Regina said warmly, embracing him, "I wouldn't be here without you." "You earned this position through 20 years of excellence," Harold corrected. "We just helped clear the path." The ceremony began with the mayor, newly elected after the previous one's indictment. welcoming the crowd. Faces that had once been twisted with hatred now showed hope. Children of all races sat together on the courthouse lawn. As Regina took her oath of office, Harold felt Malcolm's hand squeeze his shoulder. They watched her raise her right hand, voice clear and strong. "I do solemnly swear." The crowd erupted in applause as she received her chief's badge. Regina's teenage daughter beamed from the front row, capturing everything on her phone. History being made, Harold thought, by those who refused to accept injustice as normal. After the ceremony, well-wishers surrounded them. Young officers sought Harold's advice on community relations. Parents thanked him for making their children's future brighter. Civil rights activists who'd stood with them shared proud embraces. The afternoon passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. As the sun began to set, Harold and Malcolm finally made their way home, where they settled into the old wooden rocking chairs on the front porch. "Remember when this street used to clear out if we sat outside?" Malcolm asked, loosening his tie. Harold nodded, watching children play freely in the golden light. Their laughter carried on the evening breeze, black, white, and brown children chasing each other without a care in the world. "Your mother always said change would come," Harold said softly. "She believed in it, even when I had doubts." "She was right," Malcolm replied. "Look at them out there, Dad." "Really, look." A group of kids had set up an impromptu basketball game using a portable hoop. They divided teams without regard to color, arguing only about who got the best players. Parents chatted nearby, sharing snacks and keeping casual watch. Mrs. Johnson from next door waved as she walked her dog past Harold's yard. 6 months ago, she would have hurried by with eyes averted. Now she stopped to share news about her grandchildren. "Chief Williams asked me to help develop new community oversight policies," Harold mentioned after Mrs. Johnson continued on. "Said my legal experience would be valuable." Malcolm smiled. "Planning to come out of retirement? For this?" "Gladly." Harold rocked slowly, contentedly. "The work's not finished, but at least now we have honest people in charge of finishing it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The streetlights flickered on, but the children kept playing, their parents unworried in the growing dusk. A young boy retrieved his ball from Harold's flower bed and called out, "Sorry, Mr. Tate." "No harm done, Tommy," Harold replied, remembering when that same child's parents had forbidden him from coming near the yard. Malcolm watched the boy rejoin his friends. "You know what strikes me most? The natural way they all interact now. No tension, no fear. That's how it always should have been," Harold said. "Maybe that's how it can stay." The evening air grew cooler, but neither man moved to go inside. They sat together, father and son, watching their community's transformation unfold in the simple joy of children at play. Their shared smile reflected all they'd achieved and all they still hoped to see. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.